A final chance to convince Americans. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton packed the last presidential debate with insults, accusations and name-calling. With the election just over 2 weeks away, what does this campaign reveal about US politics? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Nasty, dangerous, Putin's puppet. The verbal punches flew thick and fast from the candidates for the world's most powerful political job. Democrat Hillary Clinton and her Republican rival Donald Trump did not hold back in the third and final US presidential debate. They disagreed on policy too, including on Iraq, Russia, Syria, the economy and immigration. Trump said the poll is rigged and has refused to commit to accepting the election result if Clinton wins. There were no niceties. They skipped the customary handshake and didn't hesitate to go on the attack.
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit
no, you're
that the
puppet. We don't gain anything.
He has all these
Iran is taking over Iraq.
Secretary Clinton.
Iran is taking over Iraq. We don't gain
Secretary Clinton.
We would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Wait. Secretary Clinton, it's an open discussion.
Secretary. We would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Secretary, please let Mr. Trump speak.
He's unfit, and he proves it every time
you
he
are
talks.
the one that's unfit. John Podesta said you have terrible instincts. Bernie Sanders said you have bad judgment. I agree with both.
Well, you should ask Bernie Sanders who he's supporting for president, and he has said,
which is
as he has campaigned for me around the country, you are the most dangerous person to run for president in the modern history of America. I think he's right. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure that we have sufficient resources.
All right, let's bring in our guests. Now in Washington, D.C., we have J.D. Gordon, National Security and Foreign Policy Advisor to Donald Trump. In New York, we have Basil Smikle, Executive Director of the New York State Democratic Party and a former aide to Hillary Clinton. Also in Washington, we have political analyst Thomas Frank, author of Listen Liberal or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. Welcome to you all. Can I start with you, J.D. Gordon, and ask you, from the perspective of a foreigner, because people abroad, many people abroad, are astonished at the level of debate, at the vitriolic nature of these presidential debates. Is this the new level of discourse in United States politics?
Well, this has been a negative campaign, as everybody knows, but I think things will change eventually. I think that this was unique in the fact that we have Hillary Clinton, who I believe is the most corrupt person to ever seek the presidency of the United States. So Mr. Trump is a plain-speaking guy, and he's calling her out for it, and that's caused a lot of the negativity out there, the reaction to his honestly speaking the truth. And
Basil in New York, have the ordinary parameters of polite and reasonable political discourse now been violated by these presidential debates?
I think they have been violated by these debates. I think we've pushed the envelope way beyond the tolerance level of many of Americans. If you can imagine, last night was the third debate, and it's the first time that I think we've actually seen policy really discussed in a very substantial way. In large part because I think, and one of the things you saw yesterday, it's actually very easy to get under Donald Trump's skin, which kind of feeds into that narrative that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats have been, that we've been weaving, which is that he's temperamentally unfit for the office. The way that he's talked about women, even the way that he addressed Hillary Clinton last night and calling her a nasty woman, you have not seen that in modern political history here in this country. And frankly, I think there will be a reckoning after this election for both parties, but I think certainly the Republican Party in terms of how to move forward.
Right. Thomas Frank, What kind of effect is this having, this level of vitriol, this debased language that's being used by the presidential contenders? What kind of effect is this having on the appetite for politics among the general American people? I'm not talking about the Washington bubble. I'm talking about the ordinary people on Main Street.
Well, I would say people are disgusted by the tone of this. But at the same time, you know, I don't like the sort of DC tendency of, you know, of playing the tone police all the time. This is politics. We need to have everything out there in the open. It is, you know, it's a very unusual political year. Donald Trump is running as this kind of, you know, well, sort of, he says uncomfortable things. He's supposed to be this is the whole theme of his campaign. He says things that no politician ever says. Now, I think that in a lot of ways that what Hillary says is also true, that he is sort of unfit for the office. But, you know, you have both things going on at the same time. It's kind of fun, I think. I sort of enjoy it.
Okay, back to you then, JD. Again, the competence or otherwise of Mr. Trump to hold the country's highest office constantly recurs, doesn't it? But I'm just wondering why you think, if you take a step away from your current role, why you think never before have two presidential candidates been held in such low regard by the people of the United States? Why these two have emerged now?
Well, I think for Hillary Clinton's standpoint, people see that she's been corrupt and she's basically had scandal follow her and Bill Clinton around basically for their whole political lives. You know, whether it's Whitewater back in Arkansas or
can I ask you not to carry on with the campaign here, because what I'd like you to do is just to reflect a little bit more, one step away from your current role as being an advisor to Mr. Trump, but just reflect on how these two candidates have come to the fore and why this year the United States is having to decide between two very unpopular people.
Well, yeah, I was mentioning why people don't like Hillary Clinton. Now, for Mr. Trump, a lot of people don't like him because he speaks like people do around the country that are very frustrated with the current situation with America in decline. We obviously see a lot of people losing their jobs, going overseas. We're losing influence throughout the Middle East, throughout Europe. And I think that people are very frustrated. People in Washington, D.C. tend to live in a bubble where they think that this is the most important place in the country. And now I've been senior staff and a senior advisor on 3 presidential campaigns, this cycle and the last cycle. And I've traveled around the country and hear people. I hear their frustrations. Mr. Trump speaks at these rallies as 20,000, 30,000 people. He's a reality TV star, has been for decades. So he says what he feels and he says what he's hearing on the campaign trail. And that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, too. So I told you why Hillary Clinton's unpopular. Now I told you why Mr. Trump's unpopular.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your balance. Basil, so it sounds very much as though the Washington machine, if you like, has failed. It's failed a huge section of the United States population, and they are finding in Donald Trump a candidate who speaks their language, even if they don't agree with everything that he says, but at least they can relate to some of what he says.
Well, there are a couple of quick things. Number one, I think I will say that JD's right in one point, which is that there is a lot of economic anxiety and angst out there among voters. And I think the sort of nationalistic approach that maybe a lot of American voters are starting to consider is not something that is unique. We've seen it in other parts of the globe, and I think it is now in this election really rearing its head in the United States. So I do think there's certain economic anxiety out there. But where I would draw the line, however, is that I think Hillary Clinton is popular. If you look at the number of votes that she's gotten both in the primary, throughout the primary, she has garnered more votes than any other candidate in this race. So I sort of go back against and push back against the popularity issue with her. And I also push back a little bit against the outsider approach, because if you look at local races, congressional races, there's sort of a 96% incumbency rate. People will vote for incumbents. What they want is someone that actually has the ability to work across the aisle and get something done. And I think that's where Hillary will have the edge over Donald Trump. But I think what the American voters want is someone that can cut through the gridlock and be a little more balanced and really understand and speak to the economic anxiety that's there.
All right, Thomas, I'm particularly interested in this this alternative theory, this theory that that Donald Trump is anti-establishment, and indeed Bernie Sanders was, who gave Hillary Clinton a real run for her money. It seems very much as though the people of the United States are crying out for somebody who is not business as usual. Although, of course, Mrs. Clinton does represent.
And they're not going to get it, are they?
Well, is Donald Trump not? Is Donald Trump not? He still obviously represents an alternative to the Washington figure that Mrs. Clinton is.
Unfortunately, it's an unacceptable alternative. Hillary Clinton is going to be elected president, and Hillary Clinton is a figure of utter complacency, and she's going to be president because it's her turn. The Democratic Party made her the nominee. They basically, as we now know, stamped out the Bernie Sanders insurgency. President Obama did everything in his power, short of endorsing her, to make sure that she was the nominee. We all know what happened in the Democratic primary, and she's going to win because Donald Trump is a phenomenally weak candidate. These are the two most disliked, most unpopular presidential candidates ever. Look, what we have to take a step back and look at this. The two-party system, you know, you had one party that basically elevated someone because it was their turn, and the other party completely fell apart. The two-party system is itself should be the issue right now. It cannot deal with the needs of the people of this country.
That's very interesting, Thomas. Let's come back to that in a minute. JD, let's look at the state of the Republican Party then, and why it threw up this controversial candidate, should we say. Was it the fact that there were too many contenders in the first instance?
Well, there were a lot of contenders, but people want change in the United States, and they see the direction the country's heading in, and they think since Mr. Trump is a billionaire and he's made a successful business enterprise, that he could be a guy who brings change to the country, not the typical governor or senator. So he beat, there were 17 candidates in the field, and he beat them handily. So people want change. But, you know, a lot of people in Washington are even saying, well, are these the end of the Republican days? That's so overblown. And the reason is because the Republicans still do very well at the state level. We have 50 states, 31 governors are Republicans. The vast majority of the House and Senate for the state level legislatures, most of those are Republican. So the party's still going to continue. I think we're going to have a two-party system unless both of them split.
All right. Now, one of the issues, perhaps the major issue to have emerged from this last presidential debate that so much of the media has picked up on, is the issue of Mr. Trump refusing to say that he would concede defeat if Hillary Clinton wins. And when he was pressed on the issue, he said the vote is rigged. Let's take a listen.
She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged, because she should never, Chris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency.
Let me respond to that, because that's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. The FBI conducted a year-long investigation into my emails. They concluded there was no case. He said the FBI was rigged. He lost the Iowa caucus. He lost the Wisconsin primary. He said the Republican primary was rigged against him. Then Trump University gets sued for fraud and racketeering. He claims the court system and the federal judge is rigged against him. There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
All right, that's obviously quite funny, isn't it? But Thomas, Frank, I want to ask you about whether you think this is a very, very dangerous statement that's been made by Mr. Trump. It seems that all of the US media is alarmed by this, the fact that he's undermining the very democratic process in the US.
Well, look, we know why he's doing it, and we know who he's appealing to when he says things like this. You know, this is this is a man who finds it very difficult to accept defeat, and so he's coming up preemptively. He's coming up with excuses for what it looks like is going to be a pretty resounding defeat for him. And we also know that he's appealing to a sort of a fear among the Republican base, a kind of unfounded, I would say even close borderline paranoid fear that there's massive vote fraud abroad in the land here in America, and it's just not true. Now then, that said, so what if Donald Trump says this? He's not going to be president. They're not, So what if he complains about it? He's not in power now. They're not going to give him any power. Too bad.
Okay, no, but I was just wondering.
So he whines about it. Big
okay,
deal.
Sorry, Basil, you were saying.
Well, if I can interject for a second, and I don't disagree with anything that was just said, but I actually just want to take it a bit further, which is that oftentimes, and we've seen this in 20-some-odd states across the country, that these questions about voter fraud really only come up as more African Americans or Latinos become enfranchised, use their power to vote, and we see that their votes are coming out in record numbers. So we see these questions about voter fraud pop up over time in a way to sort of tamp down these types of voters. And the Supreme Court struck down in North Carolina a law that would have done exactly that. And so I think, and as was mentioned before, he's speaking to a very specific audience here. And when he talks about voter fraud, and he talks about it in the states that he's mentioning, in the areas that he's mentioning, it's really targeted toward the enfranchisement of African American Latino voters. And that's one of the reasons why it is incredibly dangerous. We have a very decentralized electoral system. And for him to say that the entire system is rigged against him, I think, to use Hillary's word, it is horrifying.
All right, JD, I have to put that to you then. This is very, very dangerous. This is a dangerous manipulation of the truth that could have very serious consequences on November the 8th, if not before.
Well, Martine, I would say that Mr. Trump has said in the past that if he doesn't win, it's all going to be a big waste of time, and he spent the last 2 years being the front runner and winning the Republican nomination. So I think he's frustrated. I think that's a natural reaction to be frustrated. But he is bringing up a really good point about voter fraud. James Carville, one of the most famous Democratic strategists in the country, even said there will be voter fraud. I tweeted it out this morning that he said that. And I don't think it's a massive fraud, but if you look at certain states, look, Florida in 2000 between Bush and Gore was decided by, a few hundred votes. Remember all that hanging Chad debate? And just Florida, one of those swing states, makes a huge difference. So if there is voter fraud in the swing states, in the ones that are going to be close, like Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, it could make a difference in the election. So he has a good point.
All right, Thomas, let's assume then that the polls are correct and that there's a win for Hillary Clinton. What happens next? What could Donald Trump do in order to challenge, if he wants to seriously challenge the result that he's already disparaging even from now?
I mean, there's not a whole lot he can do. By the way, one of the things that you keep hearing from American commentators is that this is unprecedented, and it's not unprecedented. I mean, there is a rich tradition of voter fraud in America. The thing is, it's a long time ago. It's in the 19th century. I'm from Kansas City. Kansas City was like every election was stolen back in the 1920s and 1930s. It happened routinely. But no, if Trump loses, he loses. There is not a whole lot he can do. Now, what's interesting is what happens within the Republican Party after Trump goes down. You're going to have a sort of diehard Trump faction, and then you're going to have, on the other hand, your sort of Koch brothers faction, your Paul Ryan faction, as they try to come back in and reassert control and make sure that something like Trump never happens again. And there's going to be a real battle royal within the Republican Party. That's going to be really fun to watch. I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, and Basil, for the Democrats, maybe not quite as dramatic, but still a certain amount of introspection will be needed after this election is over.
Sure, I agree with that. I think there will be some introspection, and I think one of the things that we saw in the primaries is that with Bernie Sanders and other voices that have been out there, Elizabeth Warren in particular, that there is a movement to have more growth and more inclusion. And I get that. Listen, I am as a student of history, particularly as an African American. I remember when Reverend Jesse Jackson, sort of pushed the party to be more inclusive. Shirley Chisholm, first African American woman to run for president in the 70s, she made a move to make the party more inclusive. So I think the party will grow. I think not just in terms of individuals and voters, supporters, but also in terms of policy. I think it'll grow and become more inclusive. I think that's where we're headed. And I think a lot of the folks that Bernie Sanders brought out, who were not formally and necessarily engaged in the party politics previously, will get more involved in actual electoral politics at every level of government. And I look forward to that. I think we need it.
Can I just go back to you, Thomas, before I come to you, JD? But, Thomas, what will happen to that large number of people who have found some resonance in the words of Donald Trump? What will happen to them? Will they be abandoned again by the mainstream parties?
Yeah, I think so. So look, the long-term, a lot of these people are very interesting, okay? A lot of them are really, as Hillary herself has said, are kind of a fringe element, and they really, they're going to be around no matter what. But there's a lot of them are former Democrats. This is the the white working class, and these are people that are watching their way of life drain away, and they are desperate and they're very upset. And these are people that used to look to you look at a place like West Virginia, which is going to go for Trump and used to be so solidly Democratic. These are the former rank and file of the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party really turned its back on them specifically in the 70s, 80s, and 1990s with Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, and they haven't forgotten. They're bitter about it. The Republicans have also treated them very, very poorly, throw them a bone on culture war issues, but essentially do nothing for them. These people are not going to go away, and they could go for a Bernie Sanders type of insurgency. Even someone mentioned Jesse Jackson. Even if you had a figure like that nowadays, they could go for something like that. I think it's a shame that they've gone for a man like Trump, but no, they're not going away, and I don't see where they go next from here. Somebody is going to bid for their sympathy, though, of course.
All right, JD, let's come back to the here and the now. What does Mr. Trump do next? He's behind in the polls.
Well, I also worked for Herman Cain back in 2012, and when we lost, he started his own Cain TV and wrote books, again, has a radio show. So, Mr. Trump's not going to go away, obviously. I think he's still going to be a major figure on U.S. television, and I think he's going to perhaps have his own TV show. We'll see. I mean, his own TV network, perhaps, like something like a Breitbart. We'll see what happens. But, November 8th still here. He still has a chance to win. He's in it to win it, so we'll see what happens.
I was going to say, JD, you're sounding as though you're admitting defeat already.
No, I mean, November 8th is coming soon, so hopefully he'll win. But if not, I think he has a plan B. He's a smart guy, self-made billionaire, so I'm sure he has a plan to stay relative and to stay engaged in the political discourse in the country.
And Basil, to you, what does Hillary need to do? She's riding high. What does she need to do to maintain that momentum and, in fact, push a little bit further?
Well, if you believe everything that we've said, all of us have said in terms of the tone of this particular race, I think that she is in a good position to actually start to change that tone, speak more positively about herself, her own record, and what she'll do once she's elected. Not so much first 100 days, but just sort of lay out more plainly, more positively the vision that she has for the country. So I don't know if you'll see her go after Donald Trump much in the next few days, unless Donald Trump says something that she needs to go back on him about. But I think you'll see her strike a far more positive, prospective tone, so that it just reminds people that say, hey, you still have to be engaged. We still have an election here. Nothing is a foregone conclusion. And that it's more of a American exceptionalism type of language that I think she struck a bit last night, and I think you'll hear that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, can I give the last word to you, and could you make it quick, please, Thomas, because I'm quite interested in what you were saying about the two-party political system and whether it's actually fit for purpose in a modern-day United States of America. Also noting that Donald Trump has shown that you can actually launch a presidential bid without necessarily relying solely on the party machinery. He's done it using the media, social media in particular.
That's right, and Bernie Sanders did the same thing as well, and those were, I think, hopeful signs. But by and large, no, the two-party system is not responsive these days. Now, to go back, I love to talk about the 19th century. Did I mention that? In the 19th century, when the two parties would collude to keep the main issue facing the nation off the table, you'd have a third-party challenge, and we need that again right now.
All right. Can I say thank you to you all? Thomas, Basil and JD, thank you all very much indeed for a rather amusing conversation about something that should be very serious indeed. But thank you for watching as well. You can see the programme again anytime you like by going to the website, aljazeera.com. For more discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter, our handle @AJ Inside Story. But from me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha, it's bye for now.